All right, Matt, continuing on with Fight Night Picks, Parry and Counter. And our next question comes to us from somebody who's asked quite a few different questions, and they've all been quite good. So it's from First Last, who says, Parry and Counter idea. The featherweight division is full of promising title contenders. Who do you think is underrated and overrated? When you look at the featherweight scene, and who do you see being a real title picture threat in a year or 2 years? So Matt, we brought it up next to us. Now this was another question that was asked, and we didn't totally get into it, and I believe it was First Last that actually asked it. What do we use for rankings? So Matt, let's actually talk about that for a second. So I've said it a couple times. Make sure you check out @thehardcore_rank over on Twitter. I'm a part of it, and it's MMA hardcores and MMA media that go in there. We put in our rankings. We do all the way from women's strawweight up to heavyweight in the UFC. So I'd say if you could go off of that, you get a pretty good idea, because these are people that are in tune and constantly watching the fights. On Sunday morning, I go through the last UFC card. I update them, which is actually really nice. You already have them written on your phone, and you can just pick and choose and move things. But I typically, for me to, base those rankings, I go off of rankingmma.com, I go off of Fight Matrix, and I go off of the UFC's website to try and get a good idea. Then I look at records, I look at, methods of finish, this, that, and the other. But that's kind of how I go about my rankings. Now, in terms of today's video, and we're looking at the featherweight division, we're just going to go on fightmatrix.com. Make sure you check them out. I'm going under fighters that had their last fight in the UFC. I think that's kind of important, because you have people coming in and moving around, but we're just going to go based off of fighters that have actually built up a record in the UFC. And if we start at the top, your champion, Alexander Volkanovski, his last fight was against Max Holloway, which, it was a close fight.
He looked good, though.
Pretty darn close fight. So, Alexander Volkanovski, to me, he's perfectly rated. He's the champ.
Well, he is the champ. So.
He's not overrated or underrated. I think maybe before the Chad Mendes fight, he was probably quite underrated.
I agree 100%. That was this really coming out party in the UFC, because yes, you can beat Darren Elkins and look impressive. You can beat Jeremy Kennedy and look impressive, but Chad Mendes coming off the Miles Jury win, but also the PED suspension and whatnot. People still remember what Chad Mendes is. He's the best version of a wrestle boxer in the UFC, because that's really all he utilizes. He wrestles and he boxes. And Volkanovski, it was one of those cases where, does Volkanovski just kind of do everything that Mendes does, just not as well? Or is he kind of an improved version of what Mendes is? And that fight showed a lot. If you can get up off the floor and then stop the other guy in the same round, it doesn't just show a chin, it shows insane heart, absurd work rate, and just knockout power too. Volkanovski showed that he can do everything in that fight. And then from the Aldo one after that, and then the Holloway one, of course, where he won the title, Alexander Volkanovski is just perfect at taking other people's tools and just taking them away from him. Defensively, he's as close to a perfect fighter as you can find. He doesn't get hit clean very often. I know Mendes was able to drop him, but other than that, Aldo wasn't able to hit him clean very many times.
Max Holloway had a hard time.
Max Holloway, near the end of the fight, was starting to hit him a little bit more, but the first 3.5, 4 rounds, he made it so tough on him. It wasn't even funny. The pressure, just Volkanovski, the perfect example of kind of what a modern MMA fighter is. They don't do any one thing amazing. They just do everything really well. So I agree 100%. He has to be up top.
So you got Alexander Volkanovski. You got Max Holloway, who, again, I would say the same thing about him. He's perfectly rated. It's 1A, 1B at the top of 145. So it's hard to try and really get into a compare and contrast if we're talking overrated or underrated. Then we get to number 3, which is interesting to me. And again, we're on Fight Matrix, so we're not following the UFC's rankings. But here, they have the Korean Zombie at number 3, which to me,
I agree.
It gets interesting. So at number 3, I think Korean Zombie's probably your third best featherweight right now. Now, the fights that he's had since he's come back from a long layoff, what do they tell you?
He knocked out Moicano in 30 seconds, and he knocked out Frank Edgar in the first round. And he had one of the greatest fights ever with Yair Rodriguez.
Even in the Yair Rodriguez fight, he got knocked out in the last second, but he was winning that fight.
In a phenomenal fight, first of all, by both guys. It's one of the greatest fights in UFC history. But Korean Zombie, to me, poses such a big question for Volkanovski. Because Korean Zombie, no, he doesn't have the volume of Max Holloway. Max Holloway's perfect at, I'm going to hit you 500 times, and then you're probably going to go down. Korean Zombie will hit you. He plays the volume game, but the power that he has in his hands is unlike what Max Holloway has.
And unlike Max Holloway, he's going to switch it up, and he's going to throw weird things that you wouldn't see from Max Holloway.
Holloway's really good at using his movement. He's got really good legs for MMA. It's more of a boxing term because people, you can't kick and you can only punch. But Max Holloway really good at switching stances, going both sides. He can circle either way. He's really good at that. But no, good point. With Korean Zombie, he's not afraid to throw spinning back elbows, spinning backhands, wild kicks, because he's so good off the ground too. And something that he doesn't really get credit for, his jiu-jitsu is phenomenal. Jose Aldo was really the only guy, oddly enough, in a fight that you thought would be fireworks. Aldo was kind of able to grind him on the ground a little bit, but Chan Sung Jung at this point in his career, I think, should be number 3. Because I think it doesn't just matter who you're fighting, it matters how you're beating them. And Frankie Edgar, I know he's a little bit older, but I mean, Frankie Edgar had only lost to Max Holloway, Brian Ortega, Jose Aldo, and that was pretty much it up until that point at the featherweight division. He had knocked out Chad Mendes in the first round. He was coming off a pretty good performance, or he was coming off a losing performance to Max Holloway, but I still feel like he didn't fight that poorly.
It was surprising how well he
Exactly.
performed.
He didn't get finished. He had a few good moments in that fight. And for the Korean Zombie to go out there and knock him out in the first round, I think that only Brian Ortega's been able to, and I'm sure we'll talk about him later, of course. I feel like he is justified at number 3. I'd love to see the Ortega fight because more likely than not, Volkanovski's going to fight Holloway again. Holloway's still the biggest name in the division. He's got a lot of fans, and Volkanovski's going to want to fight the biggest fish possible. And if he does beat Holloway again, he's not going to really have to worry about Holloway for years to come. If you get him out of the way now, beat him twice, they're not going to make that trilogy fight. Holloway's going to have to go on some kind of epic win streak to get that fight again. So I think they're going to do that rematch. Chan Chung Jung, in the meantime, is going to have to fight another opponent, though. And that's where it starts to get iffy, because number 4 on Fight Matrix, they have Zabit Magomedsharipov, who I've had a lot of bad things to say, so I'll let you start
So
with this.
let's get into it. So Zabit Magomedsharipov, he's coming off a big win over Calvin Kattar. Now, it was a 3-round main event, which was kind of weird.
Don't get me started.
It was put together on short notice because realistically it was supposed to be the co-main event in Boston to Dominic Reyes and Chris Weidman. Then they moved it and they put it in Russia as the main event, but they kept it as a 3-rounder. So Calvin Kattar, what he was able to do in that fight was more or less...
Wait until the third round when Zabit gets tired?
But he waited until the last, round and a half to really start pouring it on. So for me... If you want to justify having Zabit at number 4, and you look at quality of wins, and I know that's how they amalgamate these, they go based on finish rate, and they put more points, more stock into certain different things. But for me, if Zabit's able to win a 5-round fight, he's number 4.
That's
but
good
for right now, I would say he's overrated just due to that fact and the fact that he's faded before in fights.
Just due to that fact? That's such a big fact. That's not a just due. We've never seen him get not exhausted after 9 minutes. Championship fights go 25 minutes, so he has to be able to completely change the way he fights. Zabit, I know everyone loves the spin kicks and crazy techniques he uses. He's got to cut down on that, because that's the thing that's making him tired. Those are big actions that you're not landing a lot.
The thing about him is, like, if you're a big Korean Zombie fan, you like the power, you like the flair. Okay, you're probably a Zabit fan for the same reason. And, oh, by the way, his ground game's deadly. I mean,
it is.
Yeah, it was just Brandon Davis, but how many Sulev stretches do you see? Like
2 fights before Aljamain Sterling did.
Still, like, it's just crazy the fact that Zabit's able to pull off some of these things, but I think we both agree he's probably just a little bit overrated.
I think he's quite a bit overrated. I'm going to stick on this for a minute. Zabit hasn't showed me anything that says he can be a champ. He misses a lot of fancy spin kicks, and that's about it. I think he's much more of a grappler than he is a striker. I know the striking gets a lot more shine because he is so flashy, but when you say his grappling's better, it's quite a bit better than his striking. The reason those flashy kicks look so good is because he's missing a lot of them. He's jumping off the cage to miss a spin back kick, and then everyone's like, oh, what if that landed? Well, the what if that landed has been going on for about 2 years now, and it still hasn't. We talk about guys like the Korean Zombie. Yes, he got knocked out by Yair in that fight. He went 25 hard minutes with one of the best fighters on planet Earth, and he was still doing very well up until that last second. That was his fight to lose, and of course he did. But I don't know how Zabit can be ahead of guys like Yair, like even Arnold Allen, like guys who have gone on these big win streaks, but have been able to show that they can kind of do everything. There's just such a big hole in Zabit's game that, yes, if we just look at his skills, I would agree he's probably the 4th most skilled featherweight, but cardio is such a big X factor that I don't know if we can put him in the top 5 just yet. Like you said, go 25 minutes, I'll be impressed, but until he does.
Let's go from 4. They're number 5, and you're talking about a guy with kind of wonky cardio is Josh Emmett. And Josh Emmett, so he had a bad fight against Jeremy Stevens. Since then, he comes back and looks like an absolute world beater. So I think having him at 5 makes a world of sense. I know his last fight was Mirsad Bektic, but he's up there among the division's elite. And I will say this too, the number 6 is Frankie Edgar. We're not going to consider him there because the future's a bantamweight. But for number 5, having Josh Emmett, and again, he's ranked above Yair Rodriguez, above Calvin Kattar, Stevens, Allen, Lamas, and the like. But still, I think out of all those names, he deserves to be in the upper tier.
I think Yair beats him. I think Jeremy Stevens beats him again. That's my problem. Josh Emmett's a really good fighter, but he only does 2 things well. He's a big power puncher and he's got good wrestling. And that will take you pretty far, and you're going to be able to beat good guys with that. It's just, we've never seen him fight a volume-heavy guy. We've seen him fight Mirsad Bektic, who traditionally is, but ever since the Elkins loss, he's never really been the same fighter. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. I think it's been quite clear through his performances. The Godofredo Pepe was nice, but he's not even in the UFC. Josh Emmett, The Michael Johnson fight's the most telling, and I know there was a fight that he won by devastating knockout, but we can't always look at where the destination is. We gotta look at the journey there, and the journey was terrible for Josh Emmett. Michael Johnson was teeing off on him. He was hitting him with a lot of weird shots too. He was able to step off to his right, get a really good angle on him, hit him with that straight left, which... If it's Michael Johnson who fought Dustin Poirier, he's probably putting Josh Emmett down. It's just Michael Johnson's had a lot of miles on him. Like, it's not the same fighter he used to be. And if you're having that much trouble with a guy like Michael Johnson, not to say that Josh Emmett, that power can't carry him to potentially even a title shot. I just don't know if power, at 145 at least, is enough to bank on at this point. So, for where the division is, I would really like to see him fight a guy like Shane Burgos, because Shane Burgos is going to not only give you the power of a really good boxer, he's going to be able to mix it up. He's going to go to the body a lot and to the head, and he's got good head movement. So you might have the checkmate, but you're probably not going to be able to hit him with that big checkmate.
And I think a really telling thing with Josh Emmett, too, he's so far slated against Edson Barboza, which is a good booking because you're talking about Shane Burgos. I think Edson Barboza is...
He's just a more kick-heavy Shane Burgos.
Exactly. So it'll be interesting to see how Josh Emmett makes out with Edson Barboza.
If Edson Barboza isn't completely drained, I think he lights him on fire. But, that fight's going to have to happen. But it is a bold prediction, but I could almost guarantee you Edson stops him if he's at all the same. It's not that Josh Emmett's bad. I don't think he is. I think he's very good. I just don't think he can be justified as a top 5 featherweight yet.
Fight Night Picks is brought to you by Strikeforce Energy. Head on over to the website strikeforceenergy.com if you enjoy the flavor of freedom. The company's veteran owned and everything's made in America. They've got great apparel. You can turn any 16.9 ounce beverage into an energy drink. There's no sugar, no calories, no stirring or no shaking required. They also have a line of different products as well as Strikeforce coffee. So if I head into my cart, I've got a 4-count sample pack. I've got a 20-ounce coffee mug. And if I head into that checkout, use the promo code FNP, click to apply, and you're going to save 20% off any order. That's FNP at strikeforceenergy.com.
All right, Matt, so we profiled the top of the division. Now, we're still going to be near the top, but one of the things that we're going to do with Fight Matrix, and I know, certain things, there's an algorithm to it, but algorithms don't really always mean everything, because MMA math doesn't really always mean anything. So we're going to list off 5 different fighters. There's a block from 11 all the way down to 15. And out of those fighters, the top one's overrated, and I think the 4 that are below him are probably underrated. So the top guy they have is Ricardo Lamas, and then, listen, he's been to the pinnacle at 145 at one point. Wasn't the champ, still got right up there to the top. And then you got Shane Burgos, they've got Ryan Hall, Dan Ige, Sodiq Yusuff. And I think those 4 guys, even though Ryan Hall's been around for a long time, he was inactive. He didn't fight for a long time. Then he had that BJ Penn fight, and now all of a sudden...
And the Darren Elkins fight, too, which you look great at.
Boom, Ryan Hall's big deal, and he's got a fight coming up against none other than Ricardo Lamas up near that top end. But those other guys that are in there, Matt, the guys that I'm talking about, the Shane Burgos, the Dan Ige, and the Sodiq Yusuff, I think those guys represent the next wave at 145.
I want to see Sodiq Yusuff fight Shane Burgos. I think that's a phenomenal fight. Eventually, I know people always say, we don't want prospects to fight each other because you kind of want both guys to grow independently, and then once they become big stars, then they can fight. Sodiq Yusuff versus Shane Burgos kind of has to happen, though, because 145, when you look at the top 10, there are a lot of sort of veterans in that area, but from 10 to 20, it's just so many prospects, and eventually we're going to have to sort through, okay, who's going to make it to the top, who's not, and I feel like Burgos versus Yusuff, it's going to play into both guys' styles, because Burgos, they both want to keep it on the feet. The power that Sodiq Yusuff possesses, though, I don't know how he makes 145. He looks like Paulo Costa, but a lot smaller. And Shane Burgos, tall, kind of wiry guy, but got really good power. It's always the skinny guys who do it.
Great hair.
Great hair, too. But he goes to the body, he goes to the head. He's one of the more exciting guys. They both are, really. I can't say too many good things about one that I couldn't say about the other. It would have fight that I'd written all over it, and that's just a fight that I would really like to see happen. But I couldn't agree more. I feel like Lamas... He's on the decline. He's on the back 9. He's a little bit older. There's still a lot of really good fights for him, and there's a lot of fights that I'd like to see him in there with. But that Calvin Kattar knockout loss just kind of seemed like it marked the end to me, because it was a prospect who put him away so badly that it was one of those cases where after that fight was done, I thought we don't need to see him fight anymore.
Yeah, like to me, Ricardo Lamas at this point, we're talking underrated, overrated. I think he's overrated in terms of where they have him in their ranking system. I think a fight that would have made more sense then. And listen, Ryan Hall makes sense. That's fair. Like, he's not going to take a lot of damage. But I think Andre Feely would have been a good fight too. But if we continue on down through, there's plenty of different prospects. I know people want to bring up like a Chase Hooper? Is he underrated? Is he overrated?
It's too early.
I think right now it's a little too early. There's a lot of good fighters, though, if we continue on down through our list. I mean, Grant Dawson, it's going to be interesting to see if he continues on at 145, where he missed the weight against Derek Minner.
That was bad.
Minner came in on short notice, and he made the weight, but Grant Dawson didn't. You've got Movsar Evloev. I mean, big win over Enrique Barzola, who we saw at 135, looked pretty good against Rani Yahya. And then you've got Herbert Burns, who you're taking on a former M1 champ and Nate Landwehr, and we had both picked Landwehr to win.
We did.
And Herbert Burns looked like a world beater. He looked like if you shrunk Gilbert and gave him a weird looking head. Like it was kind of like Gilbert, but it wasn't.
He looked really good though in that fight. We just assumed if he had to win, it had to go to the ground. He had to use that jiu-jitsu, but his striking is actually really far along compared to what you would imagine. So no, Herbert Burns is a great pick. Chrome Gracie, I feel like has been completely forgot about. And he's not somewhat... Yes, he lost to Cub Swanson, and he got beat up quite badly in that. But Cub Swanson, he had lost a few in his career. A lot of people were down on him. If you have a fight of the night with Cub Swanson, it means the fight had to be close. And even though striking's not what he's good at all, like his striking's quite basic, he was good enough at striking to still at least stay in that fight.
It was kind of like a bull going into Matador, where Chrome Gracie would kind of like push forward, and he was to his side, and he just kept doing the same thing.
He did, but we know how good he is on the ground. So if he can even bring the striking up a little bit, he's got really good cardio. We saw that in the Swanson fight. Got a wicked chin on him, too, because Cub Swanson... He's the weirdest power puncher ever, because I'm sure Cub Swanson hits really hard. He just doesn't have a lot of knockouts recently. Chrome Gracie ate those shots all day long. I think Crone is still a prospect. I feel like Crone is still going to be a guy who we're going to hear a lot from in the future. It's not done yet. A lot of people wanted that Swanson fight to sort of be the end for Crone.
I mean, he's only 5-1. Like, he's not like a CM Punk or a Mike Jackson or whatever. And Chrome Gracie's still good.
His jiu-jitsu is so good. It's not even close. Like, there's not another guy in the UFC who even comes close to his jiu-jitsu at that weight class. There's other good guys. Ryan Hall would be an interesting matchup, but that's what I say when I say Crone is that good of a grappler. I think Crone would beat Ryan Hall in an MMA fight just because both guys are going to be very jiu-jitsu heavy. But Chrome Gracie's still a guy I think we need to see in that prospect light. He's not done just yet. He's still a young guy, and he's got a lot of fight left. That's all.
So throwing in some more people, underrated, overrated. This is a fight that just happened recently. Zubair Tukhugov and Kevin Aguilar. I think both guys are underrated. I know a lot of people are high on Zubair Tukhugov, and, you know, they throw him into that, oh, well, he's in Khabib's camp, so he's got to be, you know, the best of the best. But I really think in terms of mainstream popularity and actually seeing his face out there often, he's underrated in terms of that division. Plus, he was taking on a really good wrestler in Kevin Aguilar and just passed that test with flying colors, exactly. Mike Grundy's another guy, big win over Nad Narimani. I know his name's been thrown out there for getting some bigger fights. He's certainly a guy you don't want to sleep on. I mean, 12-1 record. He's just been able to win. And then the guy that they have ranked under him, Bryce Mitchell, how many twisters I can think of 3 fighters that have pulled off MMA twisters. I can think of Askar Askarov, Korean Zombie, and Bryce Mitchell.
That's it.
You can probably think of some too, but in terms of like...
He's so good.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to get on this train too. Bryce Mitchell doesn't really look all that impressive when you watch him fight, because his striking's not amazing, his wrestling is really good, it's just he's not a big powerful athlete. Like, when you look at Adolfo Vieira, for instance, fight, a guy who we talk about a lot on this channel, it seems, when you see him fight, you're like, oh, well, of course that's a cage fighter. Bryce Mitchell just looks like a regular guy. He's not really in this crazy physical shape, but when he fights, it's just constant pressure, or constant forward pressure, decent enough striking to get him to those grappling sequences, and then once that fight hits the ground, he is an absolute wizard when it comes to grappling. Whether it be ground and pound, whether it be him going for submission, Bryce Mitchell's a guy you really have to watch out for in the future because he's only getting better. It's kind of, Israel Adesanya always says, you should have fought me yesterday because every day I'm getting better. Bryce Mitchell's kind of in that same category because every time we see him fight, it's not just his grappling looks better, every other area of his game starts to look better. So when you're really good at grappling and everything else is starting to catch up to that grappling skill, he's going to be a nightmare in the future.
Yeah, I mean, some other names they have here too. Charles Jourdain, the Canadian, he had the big knockout win over Doo Ho Choi, so you never know what's going to happen to him. I know he lost his UFC debut, and it didn't go well for him, but he's one of those guys that was coming out of TKO with a lot of promise, and I think getting a win like that in South Korea over, and it was the hometown guy in Busan that he was able to beat, so that was a big deal. Like, Charles Jourdain looked great in that fight. Above him is Billy Quarantillo, who's going to be taking on another Canadian that's actually from close to home, and Gavin Tucker. He had a win coming in. He was a guy that he spent a lot of time with, who was it? King of the Cage. That was who he was with. And we've seen it with King of the Cage where they don't want to let some of the prospects go and they keep locking into the contracts. But Billy Quarantillo is one of those guys that probably could have got a chance on Contender Series a little bit earlier.
100%.
I know we had interviewed and two guys to watch, but at the time it was Adrian Valletta and Anthony Romero. Anthony Romero's going on a tear right now, and he's fighting outside of Canada to get moving and shaking. But Adrian Valletta had a fight against Billy Quarantillo, and it was like the winner of that fight's going to get a chance on Contender Series. Quarantillo won, goes in Contender Series, gets a win. Now he's in the UFC. He's going to be taking on a tough out in Gavin Tucker. I mean, yeah, Rick Glenn beat him up, but since then, he had a big win since then. He had a lot of time off and had a big win. And that's another one of those guys. Another Canadian, Hakeem Dawodu, who had a big win over Julio Arce. And listen, I say this all the time. If I could see Julio Arce fight Dan Ige every single day, I would watch that fight. And I think, you know, you could flip a coin and one of those guys would win. I hold Julio Arce.
Dan Ige would beat him every time.
But I hold Julio Arce in pretty high regard. And Hakeem Dawodu, for him to get a win like that, yeah, he dropped his UFC debut, coming in from World Series of Fighting. He had a high ceiling. And a lot of people say he's way too overrated, even now.
I think he is a little bit, because people expected Hakeem Dawodu to be what Sodiq Yusuff is. People expected him to be this big power puncher who's going to be able to go in there and just kind of like seek and destroy a lot of people. And the Kyle Bochniak fight, I know it went to a split decision, even though I thought Dawodu won every single round, but it sort of showed the extent of what his abilities can do. He has good power, but he doesn't have great power, and he has good striking, but not great striking. So if you are one of the more well-rounded strikers at the top of the division, and I know we're comparing guys early on in their career, two guys who are a little bit more established at this point, but you have to make it to that point eventually. So even if he fought, let's say, a Ricardo Ramos, it would be a tough fight for him. Like, I don't see Hakeem Dawodu being a top 15 guy anytime soon in the near future. Yeah. But when he came at the UFC, I'm not going to lie, I thought he would be.
That's the other two names that I have for you. So, Douglas Silva de Andrade, listen, he's not going to be a big featherweight. No. He's not a big guy at featherweight. He was a big bantamweight.
He's a tiny Vitor.
He was a big bantamweight. He's not the youngest guy, especially at 45. But he came in and had a win over Henan Barao, and that is a name. I was going to say it holds water.
I wouldn't say that's a prospect, but
it's a name. So Douglas Silva de Andrade kind of reinventing himself at 45. And then the other guy that I have on here, Matt, you talked about him already, was Ricardo Ramos. And this is a guy that, like, flash and flare. UFC 217, he had a huge win over Ayman Zahabi, and he won his last fight, actually.
No, he got TKO'd. Okay, we can go up and look at it. But he has been finished recently.
Maybe Spike Carlisle. He beat Luis Eduardo Garagorri. He's won two in a row. But still, Ricardo Ramos is that guy that really, I think, where he lost that fight against Syed Nurmagomedov, that was where a lot of people kind of jumped off the train, but he was able to get back on it.
No, you're right.
If he was a more active fighter, that's the thing.
He reminds me of Hanato Moicano to a certain degree, because Hanato Moicano, it's just inconsistency, really. At his best, Ramos in this case, he looks like he could be top 15, future top 10 talent, but at his worst, we've seen him really struggle with guys who you would assume he just kind of runs over. So it's one of those cases, I believe at least, he fights the level of this competition. If you give Ramos a really good guy, if you give him, you know, a Jeremy Stevens, let's say, he's probably not going to win, but just a guy close to the top 15, he's going to put on a really good performance and show the best of himself. But when you give him guys that, you know, he's an overwhelming betting favorite against, he's always going to fight sort of lower to his competition, which is really unfortunate because, again, when we've seen him at those heights, he does look phenomenal, but he's just, it's the inconsistency. And I feel like if he was a little bit more active, it would sort of shore that up.
And he's one of those guys that came in from Dana White's looking for a fight, which we hardly see those guys have a lot of success. He's one of those success stories and actually fought on an NEF card that we cover. So it's kind of crazy. But that's kind of the extent of underrated, overrated at 145. Let us know who you're thinking, because I know there's some fighters that we kind of glossed over. There's a lot of people in that upper echelon that we kind of just left as, they belong there.
They're good, but they're where they should be.
And again, we're going off fightmatrix.com, and if you haven't checked it out, maybe check it out. Throw us under the bus if you prefer the UFC's rankings. I would tell you to check out at the Hardcore Rank over on Twitter. You can see my rankings there, and you can disagree with me in full. You can find me at Craig Allen FMP. You can find Matt at Matt Allen FMP. We really appreciate the questions, so keep them coming. 100%. Under this video, under what we're throwing out in the community tab when we're asking for suggestions. And as we always say, Matt, Fight Night Picks,
let's get into it.